Okay, so that we stay true to time, even as people are walking in. It's 6:02, and I'm calling the meeting of the WSESD on February 24, 2025 to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely, and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public or of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email or by text message. We will do our very best to reconnect you. Nevertheless, this meeting will continue. So, this is a special board meeting. We are meeting outside of our usual location, which is typically Cusick. And thank you to everyone who is here, board members. Thank you, legislators, community members. One point of information, tomorrow night's regular board meeting will not be at the Green Street School as indicated on the calendar. We will be meeting in Cusick. And if you look at the agenda as posted online, it does say Cusick. I just want to make sure that board members and the public realize we are meeting in Cusick. So, Matt Shibley.
Madam Chair, point of order, I'd like to make an announcement that we have a sign-in sheet. It is a yellow piece of paper going about the audience today. I'm going to try my best to capture everybody's name for the minutes. So if you could clearly write your name and town, that would be really helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay. And it's hard for me to recognize people out of context. So if there are elected legislators sitting in the audience right now, I invite you to come and sit in this very public, exposed space. And it's not to put anyone on the spot, but really for you to know who the elected officials are in this district and to know that we're here to hear voices. The purpose of tonight's special meeting is to gain a better understanding of Governor Scott's proposed reforms of Vermont's system of education. As typical with every agenda, we will begin with public comment on non-agenda items. And this is time for the board to listen and to take notes. It is not time for the board to respond to comments or to engage in a dialogue with the public. If appropriate, the board and administration will take next steps. So again, public comment on non-agenda items. There are mics on either side. And I'm looking to see hands online. I don't see any hands. I don't see anyone in this audience.
Jody.
If it is on a non-agenda item, not having to do with these proposed reforms. This is the only agenda. So if it's something else that's churning through you, speak now.
There's a lot.
I bet. And I'm going to invite people, since the mics are down here, you might want to gravitate forward or ignore me. So, okay, I don't see any hands. We're going to move on with this meeting. we want to appreciate everyone who has made this meeting possible, from maintenance to security, and especially Mo Hart in the central office. There is nothing, both either macro or micro, having to do with a meeting of any kind in this district that she doesn't enable to run smoothly. So I'm sure Mo Hart is listening right now. Thank you, Mo Hart. Thank you. Okay, and thank you to everyone who is participating in this evening's discussion, and it is truly a discussion, from students who are present to district personnel, administrators, board members, community members, and we are grateful to our state legislators who have been able to accept this invitation. So I would like at this point to put on the board meeting norms that a number of us will recognize. And it is a reminder of civil, courteous discourse, especially when the topic is particularly disturbing or when the conversation is difficult. Let's take a pause and remember these norms. So at this point, will everyone at the table introduce themselves going down the line, as well as what their role is as an elected official? So maybe if we could start on the far left and move down the line.
Brian Reamer from Guilford, representative of Guilford for the WSESD School Board.
Dan MacArthur, I'm the school board chair in Marlboro, a VSBA representative from this region, and one of the steering committee of the Rural School Community Alliance. And Deborah has asked me to come tonight, and so that's why I'm here.
Colleen Savage, I'm a Brattleboro rep for the WSESD board.
Mark Spino, superintendent, Windham Southeast.
Matt Shibley, WSESD board from Brattleboro, and your clerk.
Kimberly Price, the rep from Brattleboro on the WSESD board, and I am the vice chair.
Okay, Deborah Stanford. I am a rep from Dummerston, and I am the school board chair.
I'm Ann Beekman, representative from Putney, and I'm chair of the WSESU.
Sean Murphy from Guilford, WSESD, and the WSESU.
Tim Maceo, Brattleboro. I'm on the Windham Southeast Supervisory Union and District Boards, and I'm also a member of the Rural Schools Community Alliance.
Ruby McAdoo, I live in Putney, and I'm on the WSESD board.
Good evening. My name is Nader Hashim. I'm one of the senators for Windham County. I live up in Dummerston. I serve as the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and I'm also a member of the Senate Education Committee.
Hi, I'm Emily Kornheiser. I'm one of three representatives from Brattleboro. I represent District 7, which is West Brattleboro, and I'm the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee.
I'm Molly Burke, another representative from Brattleboro, incorporating this area of town, and I serve on the Transportation Committee.
Last, but hopefully not least, I'm Ian Goodnow. I'm the last rep from Brattleboro. I represent District 9, which is the downtown, and I sit on House Judiciary Committee. And I am very grateful for the invitation to be here tonight. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you to everyone.
I'm sorry. And Wendy is she joining us?
I think Mike is too.
We have two people.
We might have some reps on Zoom as well.
We do. Okay, so if you are an elected representative and you are online, could you unmute yourself, please, and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mike Merwicki, and I'm a state representative from the Windham 4 district of Putney and Dummerston.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Glad you can join us. And is there anyone else online?
Hi, everyone. Jessica Everlith, the Windham Southeast School District Board Member from Dummerston.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Anybody else online?
I believe Zon Eastis from Guilford and Vernon is joining us in a little bit.
I believe he'll be a few minutes. Yes. And Nada, did you say that Wendy Harrison is online?
I believe Ian mentioned that, but.
Okay,
yeah.
all right. Thank you. We're going to start this off with my asking Dan MacArthur to offer a summary of the proposed reforms and possibly the status of alternative proposals. After all, change is necessary. It's what that change will look like. That's what we're here to talk about.
Thanks, Deborah. I feel a little bit out of place here because I'm sure Senator Hashim or probably Representative Kornheiser, any of the reps could cover this as well as I can, but I will give it a shot. And what I've done is kind of condense it into several different proposals that have come along, the sequence in which they came along, and what my opinion is of their prospects. And that starts, of course, with the governor's proposal, which came out. It's not a bill; it's a proposal, and it came out in little bits. And it's in three. It comes in three sections essentially. The first one is the funding section. The second section is the governance section, and then there's accountability and guardrails is the third section. So it's three different proposals essentially, and it's important to keep those in mind because there will be counter proposals coming from all kinds of different places, and they will mostly direct themselves to one of those three rather than to all three of them. It's just it's too big to address. So keep that in mind. There are kind of three different things that are getting looked at here. There's funding, there's governance, and then accountability and guardrails. I think the next one that I was aware of came out from the Vermont Superintendents Association. I'm not sure whether it was shared publicly. It was shared to the Vermont School Boards Association, who had a chance to look at it and had a chance to essentially sign on with it or give it the thumbs down or whatever. It got a very cool reception from the Vermont School Boards Association. But I will say this, that the governor's proposal got a much cooler reception from the Vermont School Boards Association. Sue Siglowski, the executive director of the Vermont School Boards Association, came out with a statement essentially panning the governor's proposal. But, from my opinion, that's all the governor's proposal was meant to do. It was meant to just throw something at the wall. And this isn't meant to be negative or derogatory. I think there was a place where governor and the Secretary of Education felt they could start with a really, outrageous proposal and see what happened and go from there. The next proposal that I was aware of actually came along from the Rural School Community Alliance, of which, as Tim mentioned, he's a member. This school district is a member of it. I'm on the steering committee of it. And we had the Rural Schools Community Alliance had a press conference in Montpelier a few days ago. I think it might have been Thursday. I don't know. I can't remember the day. And I think that the Rural Schools Community Alliance, rather than come up with a bill, we did a thing similar to what the governor had done and what the Vermont Superintendents Association had done, which is basically just come out with a statement. This is where we think education ought to be going in the state of Vermont. And there are just 5 guiding principles. I'll read them to you really quickly. First guiding principle, elementary schools, young children should be educated close to home. We support Vermont public schools of all sizes. Second guiding principle, middle and high school children may benefit from what larger regional schools can offer. Third guiding principle, closing schools does not fix Vermont's problems. It creates damaging new ones sometimes. Research shows no correlation between cost and quality in relation to size. Fourth guiding principle, school governance should be a partnership between districts and the state. And the fifth guiding principle, focus on funding with students, communities, and taxpayers in mind. So those are the guiding principles of the Rural School Community Alliance. And there's an entire program that goes with it, but suffice it to say, things are in flux so much now that I'm just throwing out the big picture here. And then I think the senators and reps can correct me if I'm wrong. The House Ed Committee came out with an actual bill, or the beginnings of a bill, just a few days ago. And we had a chance, the steering committee of the RSCA had a chance to look at it this morning and talk it through. And it's a much, well, it's better formulated for one thing because it's in bill language. So rather than state an aspiration, it's actually stating it in the terms that they are proposing become the law on this. I can't say that I 100% support it, but it's much closer to what I would think our legislature would want to do in terms of overhauling the education, the entire education situation in Vermont than the governor's proposal. So that's a kind of a quick and dirty overview of where we are at this point. Is that sufficient?
That's great, thank you. The bill that you're mentioning, is this listed as H-180?
No, I don't think so. H-180 is actually Herb Olson's bill, and that has to do with school closures, behind which the RSCA is very firmly entrenched. We 100% support and would encourage you and all legislators to contact your legislators, ask them to support the school closure bill, because it's, even the governor's proposal mentioned guidelines and guardrails, a guardrail so that schools cannot be closed without all of the unintended consequences that we tend to see. Sorry to get off track on that. The bill that we got, a partial bill that we got from House Ed, I regret to say I don't know the number, but I think I can look it up. I will check that out.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering whether we just need a listing of what the governor's proposal looks like just the nuts and bolts and what the changes will be, unbiased. And I'm wondering if any of Emily, if you want to take that on.
Just a bit of housekeeping. So committee bills, which is what that bill that Dan was just describing from House Education, it's sort of language in process, and so it doesn't have a bill number yet, which makes it a little hard to track if you're an outside spectator, community member involved, engaged. But it has like a code number that I could try to look up later for anyone.
Okay.
So I think it's helpful to add just a bit of background of how we got here. I think you started us, and I would have brought a PowerPoint or something. We were hoping that someone from the administration could come speak their own words, because I don't generally find myself explaining the administration's actions. But
and by administration, you mean state administration?
I mean the state
Yes,
the state Republican
clear.
administration, yes, led by Governor Scott. So, as you mentioned at the beginning, Deb, we do need change. We are operating under a system of governance and funding that passed in the 90s, Act 68, and a bunch of legislation that followed from that. When Act 60 passed, It was motivated by significant disparities in educational opportunity between districts throughout the state of Vermont. And we are at that same level of disparities between districts in the state of Vermont as we were back then, maybe worse. And so I think sometimes when we're here and we're only looking at our own communities and our own districts, it might be hard to realize that. We have an extraordinary school district here that's supported by community members who are deeply committed to the success of our schools and are deeply supportive of school budgets. Not every district in the state makes decisions in the same way, and that leads to very different outcomes and very different opportunities for students. We also, because of a wide number of factors, hi Zon, come on down. Because of a wide number of factors, we saw an incredibly large change in tax bills, property tax bills in the last year. And some of that was because of increased costs of health insurance. Some of it was because of an expiration of federal aid. Some of it was because of just good old fashioned inflation. Some of it was because of really significant post-pandemic social emotional needs in kids. There's a lot of reasons. There's no single reason that was the strongest, but it led to really skyrocketing property taxes all over the state. And a lot of headlines about those skyrocketing property taxes. And so we entered this legislative session and this year knowing that the opportunities available to kids throughout the state are not consistent, they're not fair, and they don't give every kid in Vermont an equal opportunity to go out into the world and make their mark and be good citizens. And we know that there are a lot of Vermonters who also can't sustain the kind of changes in property taxes that we saw year over year. And I'm sure there are people like that in this room. I think I'm one of those people. I'm sure there are people like that at this table. But no one wants to throw out our schools just to fix taxes, right? And nor should we. And so that's the context that we entered this legislative session with. At the beginning of the session, the governor's team, and the governor included, put forward a proposal that had 3 pillars, as Dan said. One was to significantly change the finance system, both how we manage our property taxes and how we get money to our schools. To significantly change the governance of our schools and our school boards, to move to fewer districts, to strengthen our agency of education, to change essentially how we deliver education in Vermont, and then significant changes in accountability that have been building and necessary for a long time in terms of how the agency of education holds and supports districts to reach quality standards. I'll just talk about the financing for a brief moment, and then I'll pass it over to Nader. The changes in the financing system that were suggested would move Vermont to something called a foundation formula. The majority of states around the country use something like a foundation formula. Before Act 60, we had something called a foundation formula. But that foundation formula that we had before Act 60 is significantly different than what is being proposed and significantly different than what is used all over the country at this point. What it is that for every student in the state, there's a base amount that's determined to be the appropriate amount to deliver a quality education to that student. And then more dollars are added, those are called weights, to determine if a student has English language learning needs, might come from an economically disadvantaged background, a number of different reasons why it might cost more for that student to get an equal or equitable education. And then, depending on how many kids are in a school district, that district receives a lump sum payment from the state to cover all of the financial needs of that district based on the needs of the kids in that school. And so that school boards and teachers and districts don't need to fight about whether or not how much they should raise from local taxpayers, but instead focuses on how they want to budget that money that is considered an appropriate amount of money to spend. In some arenas, that would mean districts would get less money. In some districts would get a lot more money than they do now. Under any foundation formula, that would be true because we have such disparities in how much we spend per district right now. So that's one aspect of it. The details of that really, really, really matter, and getting that number right really, really, really matters. The second part is changing how we do property taxes. So instead of having something called the income yield, we would move to a system of essentially discounts on the value, the taxable value of a homestead. I can get way more into the weeds on that if anyone's interested, but it's pretty weedy. And that is designed to simplify people's experience of their tax bill under the assumption that people make decisions about how much is an appropriate amount to spend based on their own experience of their taxes. And it's important to have more transparency and consistency between those two things, a closer link, so people can make better decisions. There are a lot of sort of other very in the weeds changes to the financing system, but those are the two big picture pieces. Under the proposal from the governor, if districts want to spend more than the foundation formula, they could raise that locally with, depending on the wealth of that district, maybe have the state kick in some to sort of even that out. There's a lot of questions around that too, where the details really, really matter to make sure that it's fair. And then for the changes in governance, I will pass it over to Nader.
Thank you. So,
Yeah,
able to hear me? Okay. So Senate Education is primarily going to be focusing on governance. And what I mean by governance is taking a look at how many districts we are going to have. The governor's proposal is to go from 119 school districts to 5. And generally, the sense that I'm getting among other senators is that 5 is too small a number for districts in Vermont. But that leads us to the next question, which is, what is the right number of school districts to have? But it also goes to a deeper question of what happens to our school boards. So the governor's proposal is that every public school will have its own advisory committee. These committees, well, it's in the name. They advise that school district, one of the 5 or however many end up getting created. The amount of power that they have is not particularly significant. They are able to manage school improvement funds if they receive any, and that's essentially the extent of it. It would be a group of unpaid volunteers who would be put in these positions, unelected volunteers to serve in these advisory boards for every school. And so the main question that we have been grappling with is what happens to local control. That's one of the questions. Some of the other pros and cons that we've heard about going from many smaller districts to just a few larger districts is the fact that when we have smaller districts, there is less access to specialized services and there are more disparities across districts, but there's more local control. But on the other hand, when you have bigger districts, you have easier access to specialized services, but you also have transportation concerns and a loss of local control. So that is going to be one of the, well, essentially going to be the main issue that Senate Education will be grappling with. The other piece that I also wanted to mention is that the proposal has been very vague as to what would happen in terms of private schools. There is the suggestion of the creation of attendance zones followed by a lottery system in which students might be able to attend a private school. And the main factors that would go into that is geography and whether or not they have any siblings who are attending the private school. And the specifics of the proposal, we'll be getting those this week. I was looking at the agenda earlier this morning, and the entire week for Senate Education is actually finally getting the language for us to work on. And one last thing I want to add is that one of the things that's most important to me is not rushing on this. The proposal is that we implement this entire plan within 2 years. I think that is much too soon. I believe there's a general agreement among my colleagues in the Senate that 2 years is much too soon to implement this broad and sweeping plan. And so I will leave it at that for now. Thank you.
All right. I don't know. Yes, Dan. Yes.
Might make one comment. I just want to make sure that people understand that the language that came out of House Ed, as Representative Kornheiser mentioned, is just it's just preliminary, and it only deals with the governance portion. There is nothing yet as to funding. So I just want to make it clear that this is all, as everybody's saying, a work in progress. Thank you.
Yeah, very much a work in progress, considering it's slated to go into effect in 2026. It's a ton of unanswered questions. My commentary for the moment. Emily.
Can I do like a moment of like legislative process 101 to explain the context for the missing language?
Sure. And then I really want to open it up.
That would be great.
For community voices. Sure.
So the legislature runs on a biennium system. So this is the first year of the biennium. A biennium is 2 years. Each biennium, we have a session. We have 2 sessions. Each session is 5 months. So the biennium just began. We were all elected in November. We started in January. We work until May. And then we leave and come back again in January. Any legislation can be in progress through both sessions of a single biennium. However, within a single session, that January to May, if everyone in the room knows this, I'm so sorry. A single session that runs from January to May has a midpoint that we call crossover. That midpoint we call crossover happens the week after town meeting week. And that's when any bill that needs to leave the House to be passed in the Senate needs to pass the House, or any bill that needs to pass the Senate to get to the House needs to go through that. And so essentially any bill that's going to leave either body needs to be finished by that midpoint week. There's sort of all kinds of, shoving things into things and sneaking them through, but major pieces of legislation generally need to be finished by that week after crossover. It is standard practice that when the administration has a proposal, and usually every department of government has at least a housekeeping bill where they're just sort of straightening out statute. Generally, they draft that language on their own before the session starts in, say, December. They hand that off to the highest ranking member of their party. So in this case, it would be the highest ranking Republican on the Committee of Jurisdiction. That member gives that legislation to our drafting attorneys in the State House. And then that bill is introduced in the early weeks in January. This particular, that is sort of the schedule that is generally needed in order for us to get our work done in time for crossover. But it is still a very concentrated amount of time. And I think most of us learned the early lesson that to actually pass anything, you need to work on it with a number of people throughout the entire summer off session, so people are prepared. So this particular proposal, we received a PowerPoint the first few weeks in January, but the actual legislative language was not given to the highest ranking member on the House Education Committee until last Friday. And it is being introduced as legislation this Tuesday. The finance sections we sort of got snuck to us and we've been working with in committee, but has also not been officially introduced. But the Ways and Means Committee has sort of had that language for about 2 weeks, and the House Education Committee is getting their language on Tuesday. So that's just sort of the timeline we're working with. We generally wrap up our work in May. There's talk of extending the session to continue education reform into June, but that's still not much more time. I'm done talking now.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a packed schedule. And if there's no further comment for the moment from our elected legislators, I'd like to open this up to community comment. I mean, that's why we are here. There are microphones on either side, and I will endeavor to call on people in order with respect as well to Zoom, as well to people sitting at this table. I recommend that we limit our comments to 2 minutes so that everyone has a chance to speak. And with respect to disabilities of any kind, if it's difficult to stand at the microphones, raise your hand and I will definitely call on you. Okay. Yes, and coming up to the mic would be great if you can. That would be great. Thank you. And if you introduce yourself by name, of course, and by town of residence. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Matthew Wojcik and I live in Brattleboro. Thank you very much for having this meeting tonight. As a member of the public, I know even less about the governor's proposals than you folks do, and I can tell that you don't know as much as you'd like yourselves. Just off the bat, I hate hearing it called reform. That word implies improvement. I think it's a proposal for change. From what I've heard of it, it does not seem to me a proposal that improves things. I'm very sensitive to people's property taxes. I'm a landowner myself, and my taxes are high and have been getting higher. I'm also very sensitive to disparities among different school districts, and I want everyone in Vermont to have educational opportunity for their children. 5 districts to me seems crazy. That's way too few, way too many, way too large. I think it's a good way to claim access to some of those services that wouldn't really be probably true access in practice, again, because of those distances and things like that. Local control is something that also worries me quite a lot. Advisory groups for each school having no real say, reporting to a district of that size seems also something that would be just really disadvantage compared to the current thing. Honestly, I mean, I know that there's allegedly some cost savings. I think there would be from consolidating districts, but I think the number that we have now is a lot closer to what I think seems good than 5. I think that's probably enough for me for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think you were about to get up before. Yes.
Thanks. I'm Tessa Anders from Brattleboro. One of the things about the governor's proposal that's really alarming to me is the proposal to expand public money going to private schools. And so I would like to know a little bit more, maybe from the legislators, about if you have any more information about that or what's happening with it in the House and the Senate. And also, I don't know if the Rural Schools Alliance has been taking that particular aspect of this on. There's a lot of things that I would like more information about with this, but I think that expansion of public money going to private schools is a particular concern of mine. Thank you.
And it's oddly worded. There's a lottery associated with it, I do believe. And I think that is in doubt as well in terms of how that's going to work. So I don't want to limit comment at this point, unless there is something very specific that a legislator wants to present having to do with that. Okay, I'm going to move on. Laura Chapman is online right now.
Hi, thank you for holding this meeting. I have a couple points of curiosity. One, I would love to see the savings that came from Act 46, the recent consolidation that we all just went through statewide into larger districts, or at least most of us went through. Because as a taxpayer, I haven't noticed any savings. And as somebody that pays attention to the budget, it seems as if it has gone up regionally rather than down. It doesn't seem like we've seen any administrative savings. So I'm not sure how this is going to work when we've recently tried something that didn't. And then I guess my second question is it accurate that these advisory committees would be appointed by the principals of the school? They would not be elected?
That's what I read in the proposal, that the members of each school's advisory council would be appointed by, I believe the language is the building principal. So,
Yes.
Right, that's correct. Okay.
I guess my point in asking that is, though I have great relationships with the principals that I've dealt with, I think they're wonderful humans. I have a little bit of concern in a committee that has no real teeth to it being appointed by the principal of the school. That's really insular and doesn't feel like it would achieve what we as locals would hope a committee representing to a very large district would be able to achieve.
It feels like a model of our leadership councils that is very specific to this district and only exists in this district in the entire state. The difference is that members of the leadership council as it exists right now are not appointed by the building superintendent. So it has a broader reach as against one person making those decisions. I found that interesting as well. So cans online, but I see Jody Normando in the back from the town of Dummerston.
Yes, and I'm going to stand here. I'm not going to walk down there. I have a pretty loud voice. I think everybody can hear me.
Yes.
What it concerns me, there's several things that concern me, but there's been one proposal after another over the last several years. And in these proposals, the legislature is to blame for putting a lot of these things on the school districts that are not specifically education. And we have to do them here in our schools. And then they say we're spending too damn much money. And I wish to heck that the legislature would take the blame themselves for what they put on. I mean, healthcare is one of them that they've taken over doing, and healthcare has done nothing since the state has taken it over, except for rising. You've got your social services all in there, and you've got your things that affect the kids, emotionally. You've got all your counselors. All these other things have been put, the school has taken on, and a lot of it comes from the legislature itself. And I believe that the school is a perfect place to take care of some of these issues because you have the kids. But what I get really upset about is that we get blamed for having a high budget because of this. And I wish that the legislature would take that to mind. Please, take those items out of your general fund, take them out of your social fund, take them out of other things other than the educational fund. And I know I see some friendly faces up front, I see some unfriendly faces up front. But that really bothers me. And it's one thing after another to take away our small schools. And in this district, and I think Emily said she was correct in saying this district is an excellent district. So why are we being put under the thumb of the state as well as everything else? We try our darndest here. We have good people working for us. We have, good teachers. The kids are good, the kids do well. So I want the legislature to take the blame for some of the things that are happening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jody. Thank you. So please come up to the microphone, and that way we can make good use of time if you're standing. Your name and
Hi, I'm Rick Zamor, Guilford, and I'm relieved to see the skepticism of the governor's proposal at the table. I sense that that's the case. I was extremely alarmed by the consolidation proposal, and it reminds me so much of Act 46, when a lot of us worked hard to, to propose alternatives, which we were allowed to do under the supposedly under Act 46, but disgracefully we were ignored, and we were forced, despite the local votes against consolidation, to consolidate. And I would just encourage, like the online speaker, I would encourage all of you not to consolidate or vote for any consolidation without seeing proof of savings from Act 46, which I don't think there are. I could be wrong, but I have not seen them, and I think that's the sine qua non for deciding to consolidate. That's my comment.
Thank you. Okay, I see Liz Adams online, and then we'll come back to the microphones. Liz?
Yeah.
Liz Adams
well,
from Putney.
Yeah, thank you. Jody is right in some aspects. We expect our schools to do far more than they were ever expected to do before. And so blaming the school budgets for providing services that our kids need shouldn't be coming out of the ed fund. I think those expenses need to be separated out, or funding taken from another agency to cover those. A lot of things have been dumped into the ed fund. Some of them need to come out. I think the legislature, while I appreciate much that you do, moving from one thing to another thing to another thing without analyzing whether the first thing worked at all is not being very responsible. I've read through the Picus Odd stuff, and I can go through that stuff and say that you can't do that in Vermont. We have mountains here. I just think that employing that group is a mistake. They're used to flat land. They're not used to a state like this. But what really alarms me is the state trying to take power away from what is traditionally and highly cherished local control. That, in my book, is a huge mistake, and you would do well to heed that. I would also like to point out that when a school is closed in a town, the town dies. Property values go down. They don't recover. And I think that has been ignored. And yes, we have some very small schools in this state. But the issue around those should be, are the kids getting a good education? And I would point out that particularly the town of Peacham, I am part of the group that supports the Rural School Alliance. Small schools can offer an excellent education, although it may be different than a school in a big district. Nobody has said it yet, but I'll say it. Governor Scott's plan comes straight from the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative foundation, which wants to, and has been for a couple of decades, trying to push for public money to go to private schools. And that is not acceptable to me, and I don't think it's acceptable to most of the people in the state. But taking power away from local control, that's not right. And it didn't save, as far as I know, it didn't save much money. Act 46, has never been analyzed. And Jody's right in pointing that out. You pass something, a whole slew of us came to Montpelier many, many times to testify before the House Ed Committee.
So, Liz.
So I'm encouraging you to take responsibility. You analyze Act 46. And, you know, the Rural School Alliance has some really great ideas. We have some really tiny supervisory unions, and there may be some savings there. But you're asking us to take care of kids, to provide their mental health services, in some cases to provide doctors and dentists.
So Liz, I'm going to stop you right now. I think your point is well taken about accountability for past decisions in order to better understand what needs to be done right now. So I'm going to turn this over to the microphone on my left. Thank you, Liz.
Hello, this is Henry Zucchini. I'm in Brattleboro. I'm also a teacher in the district. My concern, I guess, is I'm sure the NEA at the state level has spoken out against this plan, but it seems to me that one of the, and I don't know, I don't want to be too cynical, but it seems like one of the intended or unintended consequences is to weaken labor unions, particularly the teachers unions, because what will happen if this proposal goes through the governance change is it'll be much more difficult for unions to negotiate the power structure. Right now, we have a pretty nice balance when we're doing negotiations at a local level to come up with a contract that satisfies all parties. I think it'll be much more unbalanced if this is put in place. And I just think, I'm a union rep in the school. I think of, when we have grievances that make it to the school board, how would that even work? How would all these all these teachers and all these schools actually have their grievances heard at one of these districts? It would seem almost to be completely improbable that would work just from a systems point of view. It doesn't seem reasonable. So to me, I'm not sure if it's intended or unintended, but it seems like a way to weaken unions in the state and weaken our power as a union to have a voice in negotiations and our conditions of work. So thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Sam Thatcher from Brattleboro, and I am also an educator in the district. I'm approaching my question more from an educator standpoint than a taxpayer. So what I noticed is the 5 districts, one of the assets or one of the benefits that I'm hearing is that we'll have increased access to specialized services for students in this large district. And I'm wondering how that would work if I have a student in Guilford. How is that going to work for the specialized services coming to them if we'd have to get it from a different area? And where are these specialists? Where do they exist? Are we also manifesting that in the budget or incentives for these things? So I think it feels like a false promise, or being like, we can give you increased specialized services for our students who need them, but how is that going to become any sort of a reality? Making a bigger line or boundary for districts doesn't increase our access to services. That's just a fallacy. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Christina Naylor Dummerston. For those who don't know me, I've been a consolidation skeptic for a long time now. I think I'm logging in 10 years of that. I just like to explain to the legislature where my skepticism comes from. I'm also a proud Finnish American, and Finland is generally regarded as having the greatest schools in the world. And that is because they decentralized their schools in the 90s. So they went from having failing schools to having the best schools in the nation. Children love their schools, towns love their schools, and the children do well on every international metric. They pay teachers more, they empower the building principals, municipalities determine what schools need, and they do it at a reasonable price. So why are we reinventing wheels and following models that don't work by getting larger and larger governance? I urge anybody to Google it, the Finnish school system. It is decentralizing, it is keeping costs down, and it's remarkable. So if you believe in paying teachers more, empowering building principals, and empowering municipalities, I think we should be informed by what works on a national level. If we become one school district or 5 districts, we will be like the District of Hawaii, which is not a great school system. A lovely place to live, I'm sure. But I really think that we should be looking and informed by what has shown to work in other locations.
Thank you. Yes.
Kelly Young from Guilford. So I have many concerns, and perhaps I'll follow them up with some emails. But I did not support the merger under Act 46. I very much opposed it. And I have to say that under a merged district, I think the superintendent and the administration and the teachers and everyone involved did a fantastic job at providing for the students during the pandemic. I think that that was the benefit of having the district, and I'm proud that our district was able to come together in the way that they did. My concern, and anybody can knock on wood or however it is you want to, but let's look at this southeast region, and let's say that we have an event that we need to all come together like that. I'm very concerned at how that would come together. I'm concerned about seemed to be the right amount of players in the right spaces when this needed to happen. And I'm concerned about how this large district would accomplish that. The other part about this is kind of builds on the couple people who already spoke, and that is, let's say that we have it's my understanding, one supervisory union office. I don't know how many are actually in what we see as the southeast region now, but let's say that there are 5. So that means we have one superintendent. It means that we have presumably less people doing like HR or special ed or whatever, all the curriculum or all the jobs that are done in each supervisory union office now. And how is that going to best serve our students? When our students, let's say that there is a student that has an issue that the parents want to go to the principal, and then it goes to the superintendent for whatever process, and are they going to have to be line up in 15 students, 15 families, and schedule their time, and then it's my understanding that there would be 5 school board members. Having served on this 10-member board, I remember when we only had 8 members, and we chose as a community, larger community, to add 2 more members from Brattleboro because it was just too much. And I have real concerns about how 5 board members will, all the other ways that it's going to affect us, but when it comes down to it, how is that going to serve the students? So I'll leave my other questions and concerns, and maybe I'll send them by email.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lisa Ford from Guilford. I guess I do have a question, but I do want to just say I'm excited to see what you come up with. I don't want to be here in fear. I want to hope that something good will come out of this. So I appreciate all the work you're putting into it. And it sounds like there's a lot of intention and a lot of good thinking. So thanks. But I do have a question, I think for Emily actually, because you said that the foundation formula was different than other states, but a lot of states use it. And so I'm just wondering what states use it and they're successful, and how is ours different? Do you see that there's a foundation formula that would work for us? Thanks.
I don't know if we want to assume that's a rhetorical question for now, and you'll get back to it.
It's up to you. You're running the meeting.
It's up to you, Emily. Would you like to respond?
I'm feeling just sort of sad that we're having this meeting without a lot more context and without more conversation. I just want to let folks know that the Brattleboro representatives, at least with our senators, are going to be at the library this Saturday? this Saturday. We were planning on talking about housing, but we can make space for other things. It just seems like a lot of this is done well in community conversation. And so welcome those conversations. So the old foundation formula that we had and a foundation formula that some other states have essentially look at the amount of money what we did in the past was we looked at the amount of money we were able to raise and then divided it. A successful foundation formula looks at the amount of money that's needed to equitably fund the needs of students in a school and raises enough money to meet those needs. There's a lot of other best practices related to a foundation formula. The weights need to be properly calibrated and recalibrated every 5 years. There needs to be an inflator built in. And it's possible to build a foundation formula within those best practices. And we've taken a tremendous amount of testimony on those best practices. It takes a lot of, I don't think that teachers should need to be picketing to pass school budgets. I think they should be able to be inside schools with kids or outside schools with kids, but not begging for their communities to fund their jobs. And a foundation formula takes an enormous amount of pressure off of that and makes it really clear what is needed and why for a whole state or a whole community. So there's a lot of ways it can work well. It just doesn't work well when it's deeply underfunded or not scientifically based. The foundation formula that the administration put forward has a lot of holes in it right now, but that doesn't mean it will always have holes. We don't pass bills as they're introduced, we edit them.
Okay, thank you. I am sure that there will be a lot of criticism about when to hold a forum like this, how long to delay it. I know a couple of weeks ago we were all at the library in Brattleboro, and Beekman, myself, and Mark Spino, we were suddenly front and center unexpectedly. And it was a wonderful outpouring of community. Many people from that group are here today. My concern was I don't recall any publicity after the fact for that conversation. And it was on precisely these issues. So my view is whether individuals who serve in the state government have answers or not, I think that we need to come together as a community. And so we come together on February 24, and I think we should come together again in March and in April and in May, because if we don't, I mean, it's part of any kind of organizing. If we don't, decisions are made for us without our voices in the process. So I think our voices need to be part of the process. I see a board member with a hand up, Ruby McAdoo from Putney.
Yes, thank you. I have one thing, a statement and then a question. And the statement really is playing off what I'm hearing from Emily, and a concern I have. You know, sitting on the school board, I feel like my head is always in these questions in ways that sometimes when you're not on the school board, you're a little more removed. And so even with my head constantly in this thing, I'm confused about it. And a big part of my confusion is I feel like a refrain that we hear is that our district is one of the highest spending districts per pupil in the state. And so to me, what that means, and I'm really trying not to live in a state of fear, but what that means is that when you think of that foundation formula, does that mean we as a district need to anticipate having less? Like we are going to be one of the districts that is struggling because we are already overspending by this foundation formula. So that's a concern I have. And so I'm just voicing that and putting that out there. The question is, before all of this hoopla really started happening in January, we were talking about the Commission on the Future of Public Education. Mm-hmm. And so this proposal came out, and then I don't understand. Like, it feels like there were lots of cooks in the kitchen And then all of a sudden, all of the air was taken up by this proposal. So I'd like to understand what was the work that was happening on the commission? Is that still happening? What is happening there? And to the extent that there is any cross-pollination or a way in which the work of the proposal, like how has it touched on? Can you answer to those things, if that's okay?
So I don't know if other people want to chime in on that. I see shaking heads. Okay, Emily?
The commission has, throughout the autumn and the commission's meetings through the fall, and I think we all talked about it in December, the administration was regularly asked if they wanted to put more proposals on the table, and they didn't. And so the proposal that came forward in January did not work through the commission, which has members from sort of any relevant folks who have any concerns about education. Since the proposal came forward, the commission has shifted its meeting schedule and its organization in order to be more responsive, and is now meeting every 2 weeks on Mondays for a number of hours, and is going around the state and is very focused on figuring out the best way to be responsive to this proposal, and is coming in regularly to the committees of jurisdiction to sort of testify and respond to aspects of the proposal. I met with some members of the commission today to ask them about average benefits costs around the state, for instance. And so they're deeply involved in sort of the legislative side of this, but the administration has not used them as fully as I think would have been valuable. Under the proposed numbers in the foundation formula, as sort of the legislation came to us from the administration, I think there are only 2 districts in the state that would not have less money than they do now. However, in sort of a rehashed or a recalibrated foundation formula, the way we count pupils, as school board members know, really, really matters. And so when we talk about Windham Southeast being a high spending per pupil, is it by the actual number of bodies in classrooms? Is it by weighted average? Likely a new foundation formula would actually have slightly different weighting categories. And so Windham Southeast might wind up in a different circumstance. If 2 districts were merged, that might change everything. And so it really is very hard to know right now whether this community or this extended community would have more or less resources as a result of this. But I will say, a lot of this comes from a pressure to lower property taxes. And there is no way, there are not very many ways to lower taxes without lowering spending. They're related to each other. And so I just that's a stark reality that feels uncomfortable to say in this room, but I feel like it needs to be said.
Okay, thank you. I see some hands online, but Board Member Tim Mezio.
Yeah, I have a question about the governance structure in the legislature. So we have a House Committee on Education, which makes policy and rules. And then we have the Agency of Education, which implements those rules. And then we have a Secretary of Education that oversees the whole thing. I've read that there's a proposal to take the rulemaking responsibility out of the House of Education and give it to the Agency of Education, which they're already resource challenged. They don't have enough people to do the assessments of bills like 173 and to even assess it. So I'm asking if the legislators have thoughts on that change.
Yes. Is it okay if I?
Oh, absolutely,
Nutter.
Nutter. Thank you.
Yes, the proposal does include bringing in the State Board of Education, which is supposed to be an independent, nonpartisan entity, rulemaking entity for schools, bringing that into the Agency of Education and making it part of the executive branch. And that there is a lot of concern about that idea because, again, they are supposed to be a nonpartisan, independent entity that makes these rules that our schools have to follow.
And that would just provide less oversight to the Agency of Education, correct?
I don't quite understand your question.
Well, the House Committee on Education provides oversight of the Agency of Education, no?
What's the board?
I think you mean the State Board of Education?
The State Board of Education.
Not quite. They provide oversight and they have rulemaking authority for all of the schools in our state, public schools and approved independent schools as well. And any private school that wants to become an approved independent school has to go through the process of getting approved there. But yeah.
Okay.
Just for the record, I invited the Agency of Education to attend this meeting. I invited them twice. And it's not like me, but I must have misunderstood the first response that I got. I assumed that someone would attend. And the latest response that I received is that I should pass along questions and concerns to an individual at the Agency of Education, and they would respond by email. I made it very clear that there's something very different that takes place when you sit at a table like this and you hear the comments coming at you. When you respond via email, you retain full control and you are in charge of transparency and accountability, and it's no longer public. So that's my big concern. And the Agency of Education, let's be very clear, they are incredibly short-staffed. And just reading the proposal, Governor Scott's proposal, the central office as it exists right now will not be able to handle a district. Our district would become, I think, one of the smaller of the five at a little over 11,000 students. We're at 2,400 students now. But it would mean that our central office would have to increase in staffing. And one person in human resources handling that size and those numbers of employees, that's not going to work. So the proposal itself, when you read the governor's proposal, there is a terrific increase in behind the scenes personnel to make a district of dividing a state into 5 districts to make it work. We have incredible sensitivity, I think, in this district to the needs of school by school by school in terms of social services, in terms of outreach to families. That's because we're small and we can have eyes on it. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts. There are a couple of people online. I will call on one more board member and then I need to move to people online, please. Sean Murphy from Guilford.
Thank you. I would just like to say how successful I think this district is. There's been a lot of conversation about Act 46 and the detrimental aspects of Act 46. 2 weeks ago, we had a summit at the WSESD. Actually, it was the WSESU meeting. All the administrators were there, and everybody had the opportunity to illustrate how they work in a collaborative sense to make sure that the students in this district, which is 4 towns, and also in Vernon, which is in the supervisory union, actually are able to implement a program that is so student-based, so based on the possibility of the greatest student success, and that probably wouldn't have happened if Act 46 hadn't been, if we hadn't coordinated 4 towns into 1 district. So there have been really big advantages to that. And then somebody also spoke about how Act 46 hasn't saved on the tax rate. And I have in front of me the state funding formula. In the tax rate, it's a little complicated because they've changed how you actually calculate the tax rate. But in 2024, so FY24, the unified tax rate was 1.518. In FY25, it was 1.502, so that's a decrease. And in FY26, the proposed budget, if passes, would be 1.341. Now, so people's taxes have gone up, but a lot of taxes have gone up specifically because of the common level appraisal. That real estate has been selling way above appraised value in every town, actually almost everywhere in the state. And if you divide the tax rate by a CLA that is below 1, your taxes are going to go up. And then reappraisal, it also means that you're paying on a higher reappraised value, which is exactly what happened in Putney. They reappraised. Their taxes last year were a smaller number than they've ever been. And yet there was an increase in the amount that a homeowner owed for the tax liability for education tax, but it was because of the increase in appraised value. So I would like to say that this district, the WSESD, is a very high functioning district, that we've taken care of every student to the greatest ability possible. And I think it's been a success story. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you. I'm going to now move to people who have been waiting very patiently. Kate Wilson, your name and your town, please.
Hi, I'm Katie Wilson. I am a Brattleboro resident. And I want to first thank you for having this forum, especially since it seems like the more we can talk about these things, the better off we are. But I'll just keep my comments brief, which are that, like, you know, a lot of the like parts around this are about like, oh, taxes are going up, I can't afford it, like everything's more expensive, right? But from my eye, when I look at the budget, the big driver of the additional costs is our cost of health insurance here in the state. And so I feel like we should be at a different forum that's looking at health insurance costs, because every year the schools are trying to level fund when that is getting to be a bigger portion of the funding. And that affects how things are in the schools. And so for me, the consolidation will not like at all touch that cost. And like does not look at what the actual driver is. It's not about how we're putting our school district together. It's about that increasingly large portion of our budget that's going toward health insurance. And that is a serious issue across the state. It's a serious issue for every company that operates in the state of Vermont, including the one I work for. And I'm sort of like, we're going to go and do all this work around this, and that isn't going to touch the thing that's driving the cost year after year. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you. David Erickson, if you would unmute and identify yourself and your town, please.
Good evening. My name is David Erickson. I'm in Brattleboro, and I apologize if this comment got made earlier. I had to step away for dinner, so that I just came back. I certainly support the idea that we need to reform our schools, especially to balance the inequalities that we find across our state. But then I'm thinking about it that in some cases, the districts are too small, and so we get inefficiency of our dollars there. And in some cases, the 5 districts, that seems like it would be too large. And like you were saying before, we'd have to add in so much administrative staff. Imagine the travel time for all those district employees that would have to traverse the district. So I would see that there would be inefficiencies at too big a scale. And I would think that somewhere between geography and density, there's some optimal ranges for sizes of districts. So I'm just scratching my head at this proposal from the governor. Why would you do 5 districts? That doesn't, I don't understand the logic or the math there. Why wouldn't you at least go with counties or, 14 or something like that? So that's just my general comment to our legislators as you're working through these things. There's got to be some balance point between the size and the number of our districts where we can start to find that efficiency of how dollars are being spent and how human resources, which are extremely important, we have to have the people that the teachers, the special educators, the facilities people, there's so many people involved. So what are those optimum numbers? What would an optimum district look like, and how can we, counter argue that with the proposals that are being put forward? Thank you everyone for being here tonight. I appreciate you putting this on. Good night.
Thank you, David. You raise an interesting issue, and I know that there are various proposals that change the structure and the divisions in the state. Michaela Sims.
Hello. Thank you. I'm just thinking about one word, and I've heard it a couple of times today, and that's equity, and in 2 different ways. And one is the equity of maybe districts that have less money having more money. But what that reminds me of is the deep, deep chasm that exists in our country right now between the rich and the poor, not just in our country, but also in our state. And knowing that districts that are wealthier will raise more money anyway, and how that will impact the students. Like that is, so that disparity will not go anywhere. The other thing that I think of in some ways, and by no means are we perfect, but we have been working at equity work for almost 20 years at this point, and thinking about the protection of our students with historically marginalized identities, and how we have spent a lot of time working at lifting them up, and how would a widened district, how would we address those concerns, and in what way will we put in safeguards? So many districts, I feel like when I started this job, there were 2 of us in the state. There are many more, and so in what way would the people in our state that are working towards for equity specifically, and centering equity in all that we do, be protected? And in what ways would the infrastructure that also costs money, that is needed to have a strong equity program, be protected? What are we going to do to make sure all our students are seen, especially in this very hostile climate that might get more hostile? This is a lot of things moving around, and I'm hoping that we can do the best to protect all our kids that we love so much.
Thank you, Michaela. I'm just wondering, is there a way of having those people who are speaking via Zoom on the big screen? Or no, we can't, not easily. Never mind.
I haven't been able to figure that out. This doesn't work like a regular.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you, Michaela. Mary Gannon, you're online. If you would identify yourself, please.
Yes. Hi, folks. And I'm not going to put myself on the screen. So, Mary Gannon, I am someone who does a lot of educational equity work across the state of Vermont. And I feel like my dear friend and colleague, Michaela, just queued me up. So I won't take too long. I first want to appreciate the legislators who are here tonight. I know you're working tirelessly right now. I know a lot of you, I appreciate that a lot of you are really thinking about equity and justice in the work that you're doing. So I just need to do a shout out to you all. I will say that similar to what Michaela just shared, we have so many significant issues of inequity, harassment, bullying, and hazing in our schools, school climate issues, that many of us who have been in the state working on these things for a long time feel that there hasn't been enough attention given to these issues from the Agency of Education. So when you have folks like Michaela Sims and other equity coordinators who are working tirelessly across the state, and we've lost some of those folks because of funding, a big concern of mine, and as many others have expressed tonight, is how will this plan impact school culture and climate? I don't see anything in the language of the plan that speaks to that or addresses that, which I don't know that that's on Governor Scott's mind, but it does concern me about our Agency of Education Secretary. I don't think folks at that level also understand the connection between the systemic issues that we see around identity-related harm and this education reform plan. And we could draw a line, many of us here would be able to do that, but I don't think the governor or Secretary Saunders has done that. And the last thing I'll say is I've been following the Commission on the Future of Public Education. And I heard Emily and I think a few other folks maybe raise it up tonight. I'm still confused about what their role is. I attend those meetings as much as I can. Honestly, I think some of those folks are confused about what their input is. And so I just want to say to the legislators that that commission was formed because of the legislation. And my experience of those meetings is that they are struggling with what their goal is and what their scope of work is. And so to find ways to include those voices, but to also include the voices of the families and communities who are most impacted. And those voices are not represented on that commission. And it's really unfortunate. Thank you. And thank you, Deborah and other folks who pulled this together tonight.
Thank you, Mary. I know there's been a lot of commentary about the composition of that commission, and it really lacks grassroots membership. If I say any more, it'll be too critical. Mike Muricky. If you unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Yes.
Well, thank you, Deborah, for pulling this together and for your leadership here. And thanks to everyone there. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. Working on the Appropriations Committee. We work on Mondays as well. So sorry I can't be there in person. One of the things I want to share is my appreciation of how much this community and the county-wide, I would say, really cares about education. And I think that's part of the frustration we feel when it seems like what we put out there doesn't get heard. I don't support the Act 46 consolidation. I don't know if any of the legislators up there today did support it. I don't support what I'm hearing from the governor's plan. The reality we're in right now is the November election created a political calculus that has empowered and emboldened the governor more than his previous 4 terms. He worked hard to get reelected with a huge majority, and he also worked hard to elect many more Republicans in the House and the Senate. And as such, we don't have the votes anymore to override anything he puts out there. So any agreement we come to with the governor is going to have to be the best we can get that he approves of. The political calculus is such that we're going to try hard to get the best deal we can, but the governor holds great sway now, and no matter what ideas are out there, this is, for the most part, as I see it, a political plan, a fiscal plan, and not a plan that really focuses on what's best for our kids. When you look at the governor's education plan, when you look at the governor's climate plan, it seems like it's coming more from the White House than the State House. And that's the political situation we are in right now. And we're going to try our best to get the best deal we can. But that reality, the political reality, is going to be a tough situation for us to move things in a direction that we're going to be happy with.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Junio Anthes Moody.
Hi, I'm Junio Anthes Moody from Brattleboro, and I actually wanted to cover kind of the same thing that Mike Murwicki talked about, which is when Phil Scott got reelected in November, he decided that he had a mandate to make a lot of changes to Vermont. Whereas I think that a lot of the reasons that people voted for Phil Scott this time around was because we generally liked the way things were going in Vermont. We were not looking for drastic changes. And everyone needs to call Phil and say, we like things the way it was. That's why we elected you. We didn't elect you to make drastic changes and make our life worse here in this great state. We elected you to keep the course that we were trying and not try and upend everything. And first thing he does when he gets that is he says, I'm gonna upend everything. And we have to just get in touch with him, call his office and say, no, we like the way things were going in Vermont when everything else in the rest of the country is going completely topsy-turvy and insane. We were doing all right, and we need to keep doing all right. So stop with this insane plans that are about changing up everything and stay the course that we were going, and we will be able to survive this time in a way that we can all stand together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more hands online. Does anyone else have comment? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Bill Conley. I live in Dummerston. I've been a school board member. I've been a teacher for 45 years, about more than half of that in public ed. I've taught in Massachusetts as public ed teacher. I've taught in 3 Vermont school districts. My daughter is a teacher in this district. Care a lot about education. And this plan, I wish I could be as articulate as the previous speaker, because I've been calling the governor's office at least every week and expressing my dismay at what I feel is a disaster waiting to happen. There's been so many wonderful comments that have been made with great detail, and I want to underscore those comments. I also want to thank you all for the service that you do. And convening this meeting, I think I read somewhere that there was criticism that this is not where we should be spending our time and our efforts. There's nothing more important that we could be doing than what's happening right now with this meeting. Yeah, I guess for me, the 2 most disastrous parts of the plan are the 5 district plan. The further you get administration from the children, the worse the educational experience is for children. The more distant the administration is from the children, the worse the experience, the educational experience for children. So, and then the voucher idea, I think, is just another disaster waiting to happen. And yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. But thank you again for being here and calling this meeting. Thanks.
Encouragement, thank you. Other comment? I'm looking down the line. I do see your hand. I'm looking down the line to see if I've missed anybody. Yes, Sean Murphy.
Yeah, this has been really informative and really good. One thing that I would like to say is that there is a specific problem in the state of Vermont with education. I mean, we've done really well in this district. It may not be universal in every district in the state. And there are all kinds of complications that bring that about. A decrease of public school students. Basically, it's been going down for the last 20 years or 15 years by 2.5% every year. So in the state of Vermont, we have a little over 83,000 public school students. And in years past, I think when my kids were here in the public school, I think it was well over 100,000. So that's an issue that I think everybody should keep in mind. And the other is the actual difficulty, increased difficulty in providing a good education because of societal issues. Cell phones, distractions, all these things adds to the complication of actually providing education. So I agree with everybody. I think that's spoken here. I think that the proposal by Scott Zoe is a non-starter. And I think in some ways, I'm optimistic that it will not happen the way it's proposed. Thank you.
Okay. Online, one more board member. Yes. Matt Chibley.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Just another announcement for the group here with us tonight that the sign-in sheet is behind the just by the doors. If you haven't signed in on the other sheet, please do so I can put your name in the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Judy Robinson, online.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak briefly. I just wanted to weigh in as a parent of a current senior at the high school and also an alumni. Our alumni graduated last year. She has Down syndrome. And I can tell you as a homeowner in Marlboro who sent both my children despite the opportunity for school choice in Marlboro, because we don't have a high school, which, my family really feels like that is draining resources from public schools, this whole school choice idea, and in particular is disadvantaging low-income students, students of color, and disabled students. So it's a problem for us locally that we tolerate school choice as opposed to really directing public dollars to public schools only. And my family has worked to try to change that in Marlboro. And we certainly don't want to see the state moving in that direction to undervalue public schools. And I'll say that the close contact that we have been able to have from the time our children were in preschool to graduating from high school has been absolutely essential to getting our daughter with Down syndrome into college this year. And not only that, but I've had other students, parents, students with disabilities, parents say that she's a role model, that without her really trailblazing because of the struggle that we've had to have her included equitably, but we've been really proud of the school system for what they've done for her, that she's been able to blaze that trail for other students who would never have gotten the opportunity because really, in a state like this, there aren't that many students with Down syndrome. So you can really make a big difference in a whole constituency's future by having and maintaining local control as parental engagement with teachers, with specialists, with special education, parent communities, and I would urge us not to move in the opposite direction because I really don't feel that as many parents are as well equipped as my family to stand up for their children who have disabilities. They cannot travel. They cannot take time off work. They cannot understand the systems and the rules. And to move that further away from them will just disincentivize their engagement and make the entire public education system more difficult and less beneficial for all students involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you. Yes. Yes, absolutely. And just while you do that, Tim, can I just wait 1 second? There's a pile of the RSVA stuff right there. You asked for them to, and I'm just wondering if you want those with sign-up sheets so people can grab a copy. Leaving. I just didn't want to not do that. So there's a sign-up sheet at the back. At the very back, and I don't know how you want to do it.
I'll just put these with the sign-up.
That's what I thought.
Everybody, this is the platform for the Rural Schools Community Alliance, and it outlines our principles and recommendations regarding the proposals.
So they're going, it's 9 pages, and so it'll be with the sign up. So we just, as a board, both the SD and the SU, at our last meetings, agreed to become part of this alliance. And it's an alliance that is looking to protect the voices and the needs of rural schools in the state. So anyway, there is literature up front. I just wanted to make sure that all those copies don't go to waste. Michelle, sorry to put you on hold.
Michelle Green, Dummerston.
Yes.
I thought I was going to have a lot of things to say, but it's actually, this is so in the infancy stage. There's so much that can't be answered, I think, and there's so many obvious questions that it just feels like wasting energy. I would comment, I agree with Sean, I sat on this board's finance committee. I think I didn't support Act 46, but I think it ended up being a blessing in disguise. I think that we didn't see savings, but we saw growth. We saw expanded services. And I think that's unique to the size of our SU. I think when you start getting too big, you're not job sharing with another school. But I think what struck me as I'm jotting notes down, a few years ago, I was having a conversation with another superintendent who's no longer in this state about how we are doing so many things right in Vermont schools. What a good job we're doing. And he was talking about, we could market our schools to outside of our state. Like if we want to bring in a population, like what we are doing is what people pay a lot of money elsewhere to get their kids to garden, to do these things. That's actually a tactic that could be had if we really wanted to show off what we're doing. But my family, we moved back to Vermont. It was my first home. I had a child. We lived further up north. My oldest child went to 13 public schools because we had to move a lot. We chose Vermont above all else. We could have gone anywhere we wanted, anywhere. We had any job we wanted. And we chose Vermont because of the public schools, because we wanted to, I had already seen from my past experience that I get to work in a small school setting with my educators as part of my team. I got to come here and buy a house and pick a house I liked, and it didn't matter if I was in an affluent community because I wasn't worried that the school wouldn't be a good school because money got poured in. And I will tell you that I learned from moving so much, great schools ratings, right? That's just like wealth and privilege and who's supporting those kids. And I actually thought we looked pretty good on our averaging our tests when I was looking at the governor's report, because we don't spend all year preparing our kids. We just tell them to do their best. And we want our kids to like to learn, and that matters. It means so much to us. What are some of any of the other things? There was just the idea of taking away the local representation that we're gonna merge when we have in our community, and you see where we put our efforts when a district over, they just canceled LGBTQ lunches because they don't know what to do. And a couple districts up, they ended their diversity work and called it reverse racism. Like, we are not all the same. And it is what attracts people and what makes people so invested in their community is that you get to put your values into your school. Our little leadership councils that we have, they totally stole that idea. It was a good one. It is working directly with your principal and making sure that you know that your values, what are we working on today? We're doing, at Dummerston, we are doing an LGBTQ forum. And this was before all of this crazy national, federal nonsense. And I do think, considering the time that we're stepping into, it's such a valid point. I think people are going to be looking for places, just like we saw during COVID. People are going to be looking for places that will stand up. I mean, we don't even know if they will. Is there going to be federal funding? I don't know. Like, if it is held over us, do we take a stand and say we'll figure it out because we're Vermonters and we take care of kids and we don't comply, and those types of things. So I think. I know there's just so many questions to still pick through, but I didn't hear anyone talking about the values of our school system. And I think that's what's missing is this is what makes our community. This is what makes it special to be a Vermonter. These are all of these faces and people that are directly involved and know the superintendent and know the teachers. And this is what's special. And you start taking that and you put it on a big system, and it's just nonsense, but I think you guys know that. And I don't know. I hope that we can find ways to keep supporting you and that you communicate with us so that we know how to support you, because I do think that you guys get it. But I heard that you guys maybe don't have the votes. So just keep communicating with us, and thank you for your time tonight.
Yes, please come up to a microphone. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you.
Hi, Bethany Ranquist, parent of 2 BUHS students. I actually got a little emotional listening to Michelle because I really like that she moved into this area. So I was born in Brattleboro, went to Dummerston School, went to BUHS, went away to college, moved back here to raise my kids. Have not regretted that once. Still don't, probably won't ever. And Michelle actually prepped me perfectly for this. So what I want to say is that I really loudly voice my opinion. Many of you on the school board have heard my voice very often because I have really strong opinions and I'm not afraid to share them. But I also want to name when things are good, not just the frustrating or the stuff that I don't like. And I really love that I can bump into anybody sitting at this table at the grocery store or at Dollar Day at the movies for Winter Carnival, and we all are out for Winter Carnival. And I really like that we have homegrown members. Not that that's a requirement. Again, really love that we have people that move here from elsewhere that come onto our boards, but I also really love that we have some homegrown people who I can look at and say, oh, yep, went to school with that person, and can have a conversation. I know that in a district with a few thousand kids, it's not necessarily possible for everybody on the school board and, one superintendent or even all the principals to know all the kids. But I feel like our kids are seen. And I feel like if there's a child who needs to be, have a placement that's other than the school that they're put in, from Brattleboro to Dummerston or to wherever, I feel like we have a school board that is local enough that they're able to take those pieces and see the good for the district and for the small schools that we do have. I don't feel like the merger has been disastrous as far as schools having their own cultures, as far as schools having their own control over, what they're doing. And I love that we still have that feel. And I cringe at the idea that I won't be able to bump into the people who are helping with the policies for our district when I'm downtown shopping, or when I'm, with my kids somewhere and happen to be, we're at the library and we happen to bump into somebody and go like, oh, hey, school board member. Oh, hey, superintendent. Oh, hey, representatives in my, in my government. I know you guys aren't necessarily going to not be local, but yeah, I guess to finish up a very long kind of rambling thing, I just wanted to actually voice that I really appreciate all of you. I appreciate the work that you do. I appreciate the hours and time that you put in. haven't served on a school board, but I've served on plenty of boards, and they are intense with work. And I just want to say that the heart and the energy that you all put in is not, it's not unnoticed. It doesn't go unnoticed. And I really appreciate that I can bump into all of you. And I guess that's my pitch for why this idea completely stinks, because I'm not going to be able to see like a superintendent if we're in a five district state, and that kind of stinks. So anyways, there you go. Thanks. And thank you, school board, and all of you guys, because you really do a lot of work. So next time I complain, just know that I also appreciate you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I am going to call on Liz Adams online, and then I'd like to talk about next steps, okay, and move this forward a little bit. Liz? Liz, if you, I see your hand up. If you unmute yourself.
Oh, okay. So we've already covered that health insurance is a major driver in the increase in school budgets. That's something that schools can't do anything about. So that needs to be addressed. Let's see. We do spend more in our district. We usually come close to the spending threshold, but we have also maintained our buildings. We don't have buildings falling down like many other towns do, and that's part of the cost of educating our kids. So we may spend more, but we're also taking care of things. And there are a lot of people who would love to move to Vermont, who have kids, but there's no housing. And I know the legislatures, we're all aware of the lack of housing in this state. But if they, people do want to move here. Like Michelle's family moved here specifically because of our schools. And I know there's money being put into housing, but I mean, I can see a way forward that would increase the number of, that would stop the decreasing number of students in this state and increasing them. And in times like these,
So
there's
Liz,
probably more than the average number of people who want to move here. So I think that it would be good to take that into consideration. I know you're trying, but I think that, these are pretty obvious, but I didn't hear anybody mention them.
So Liz, I think that you have raised a number of issues going from health insurance costs that's being that's now the burden of individual districts, and housing. And but I do know, and this goes to your point and to Michelle's as well, and to what I'm hearing, that people, I think Jessica Everlith said this at one point, she's on the board and she's online, people move to our communities because of our schools. They have families to raise. And this is not just true of where we live. It's, we think about the boundaries of a neighborhood and where we're living and our children and what we want for our children. So there was a comment, and I think it was Liz's comment earlier, that, and we've seen it, when a school closes, what happens to that small town? What happens to those families? How do you encourage individuals to move to a community that does not have a viable school, certainly a viable elementary school? I want to, on behalf of the SD and the SU board, I want to thank everyone for being here this evening. And I am wondering and I appreciate that we have more questions than we have answers. And I am concerned, even as legislators are, perhaps it's in the news, going to have to be in session well into June, if not all of June. There's very little time. And it goes to Natter's point as we began this evening's discussion. We need a pause here. We need some wiggle room to figure out the answers without this overbearing sense of 2026 and 2027. So that as nebulous, for me, as nebulous as Governor Scott's proposal, and it really makes for very interesting late night reading. Mine is, that 17-page document is, I love my red pen. I read the New York Times with a red pen. And it's full of just question marks and my written concerns that I won't share as I read certain statements about vouchers and lottery systems, which makes me very, very nervous. I'm a lifelong educator coming out of New York City, originally very few years teaching in the South Bronx in a public high school, and then moving to a private school in another section of the Bronx called Horace Mann, which is a very large day private school. These issues, I think we really do need some time to figure it out. And I think that's what I'm hearing. And again, I did say change is inevitable. Change is a good thing. We should not be afraid of it. And we do need to do something about the funding system of education. We do need to do something about taxation. It's not working well. But as someone said, scrapping the whole thing, it feels like there are a lot of moving parts and too many all at the same time. So I'm going to ask our invited guests, what do you need from us? What do you need from communities statewide? That was not a rhetorical question. Zahn, did you want to?
My name is Zahn Eastis. I don't know if people introduced themselves before. I serve in Guilford and Vernon. I'm a freshman representative, so I'm learning a lot. And I want to thank you all for coming to this meeting and listening to all these comments and concerns for the situation. The question is, what do we need from you? What do we need from you? Yeah. I think these kinds of conversations around the state I know are happening. I personally wish that the governor and his agency were more involved in these conversations so they could hear directly. The conversation that we're having at the legislature is not one right now where we're all working on the same table we're not at the same level of working. The governor and his agency have a different outlook than the legislature seems to have, and it seems to be getting more and more stark. So your input, both to us and to the governor and to the agency, are going to be very important for us to understand as we move forward, as the legislature moves forward, attempting to work at this situation. It's going to be very important that we hear from you, and do stay in touch And I can also attest to the fact, being a new person and not having been involved in lots of legislation in the past about education, I'm incredibly impressed with the dedication of my colleagues at looking at these several issues that are coming up this evening as being central and needing solutions. It's very impressive to see the people at work. Many of the questions that you all bring up have been thought about and considered up and down. It's a very complicated set of issues that we're looking at, but I'm really heartened when I see these people at work. And while I serve on Human Services, and the committee that I'm involved in doesn't have a direct line to some of the things, we are also concerned about our children, certainly, and people with all sorts of needs. So I have an ancillary approach to this, but I'm very impressed by the work that I see being done by my colleagues. And they're working very hard for Vermont and for our children.
Okay, thank you very much, Son. Tim Maceo.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, all of us really appreciated the nice comments about our district. We do have a great district, but I'd like to we started with Emily talking about the inequities in the state. And moving forward, the next conversation I would hope would consider what's good for the state of Vermont, not just for Windham County. So we really have to really delve into the facts about the inequities in Vermont, because personally, I'm proud of what our district has done, but I don't want it to continue at the cost to some other district. So these are tough choices ahead, and I hope that the next conversation will address that big issue of equity across the state.
Sure. It was a question, and it is, as elected legislators, what do you want from us? What do you need from us?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I like to stand up when I talk.
Yes.
So keep it very brief because I can also see the time. I want to echo all of Zon's points. And I want to say, I think I can speak for the delegation, all the representatives and senators up here, that we are very all engaged and conscious of how important this issue is. So I think for me, what I need is your trust that we care about this issue, we care about our students, we care about our community, and your patience, because as you can see, there's a ton that we don't know yet. And even though it's going to happen fast, there's going to be, a whole new slew of questions when more information comes. And then I just need you to stay engaged and keep coming to things that I'm at, and hopefully coming and speaking with me and emailing me and calling your other representatives, so that we can keep hearing the voices of our community when we're considering these important issues. And I want to just say I'm really grateful for the invitation and being here, because I've heard from a number of community members, but it's really helpful to hear where you all are. And in some ways, it actually makes me feel a little more confident that at least I am thinking about the same questions and I'm engaged in the same areas as a lot of my constituents are, which is great. So, but that's what I need, and I'm really appreciative. I'm looking forward to the next conversation we have about this. Come out on Saturday morning to the Brooks Memorial Library. Come chat with us all again. Maybe we'll get Zon to come too. So, great. Oh, 10:30. AM.
I want to thank everybody for their comments tonight. It was really, I was in a small group meeting with the speaker recently, and she asked us, what are you hearing from your communities? And I said, well, I'm going to be hearing. And it was, I feel that the care that people are exhibiting regarding our school system is very, very special. And I know that, my children went through Brattleboro Public Schools, and I greatly value the education and sort of personal attention that they got here. And, I can see this as a value. And we will take your words to Montpelier. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other comments? Yes.
Is it? Sorry.
Did I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, I think we thought that you wanted all five of us to answer, but if you don't, that's okay.
Oh, by all means, go for it.
Okay. I just want to echo the trust is really helpful. Things move really fast, and sometimes they move very slow, and sometimes there are rumors about what a thing is or a thing isn't. For instance, we might call something the governor's proposal in a month that looks completely different than the actual governor's proposal, and you might even like it. I don't know. But so like that kind of thing takes some trust and communication. And continuing to have these conversations. For every comment that someone shared, I had like 12 questions I wanted to ask you about it. And so the more we can be, I'm really grateful for this tonight. And I hope we can really keep on doing it in a lot of different modes, because it is so important that we find a shared solution together. And I just really love representing this community. Thanks.
Thank you. So I want to say that, there's a few things that folks can do. I think that continuing to come out to meetings like this is extremely important. I mean, there are many times in the State House where I'm presented with a new or a complex idea, and it's something that I may not have a background on. And I wonder to myself, all right, what would my community think of this? And coming to a meeting like this, or to a meeting at the library, or just getting coffee with one of us, and hearing face to face or even over the phone is very helpful in getting a gauge on how people feel about different policies. The second thing that I also want to mention is if this is an area, for example, education, if you've been an educator for many years or you sit on a school board, please reach out to us with ideas that you might have. I often say that some of the best ideas I've seen and heard come from constituents. Not to frighten anyone, but there are 6 members on the Senate Education Committee. None of them have a background in education. So, Senate Education. House Education, they're special. But it is very helpful to get new ideas from constituents who have in-depth knowledge and understanding about the challenges that we're facing. So I'll leave it at that. And again, thank you all for coming out. Mm-hmm. And thank you for the invitation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. You mentioned different modes of communication. And it strikes me that there's a lot that's been said about the Listen and Learn tour of the new Secretary of Education, Zoe Sanders. And a number of us from this district were on an early tour in Springfield, Vermont, and PowerPoint presentation. And then we were again here at BUHS. The promise had been that Zoe Sanders would be here at BUHS in Brattleboro instead of at the Listen and Learn in Burlington, but Burlington won out. And sent an excellent representative. We clustered in workshops and whatnot. Again, Listen and Learn tour, lots of newsprint up. And we know from facilitating workshops that newsprint gets rolled up. And if you've done 10 of these, you've got 10 rolls of newsprint. And one place where I've seen the newsprint unrolled from year to year is at the Dummerston Leadership Council, where the newsprint from 2 years ago, with all the options and work that needs to be done, you take another look at it and you go back to it and you make it better with the next frame and you build on it. But there is no way that Listen and Learn tour and all that newsprint has been unrolled and put out on big drafting tables. There is no way. It's impossible, that kind of detailed work. The Listen and Learn tour is referenced in the governor's proposed reforms. I keep on saying proposed reforms. I want to say that even though it's got 2026, doesn't quite feel proposed to me. It makes me nervous, and I appreciate it's nebulous, and I appreciate my colleague's sentiment, Sean Murphy, that this will not come to pass. But when someone puts something out, especially in writing, it concretizes it, and it makes me look at it carefully, red pen in hand. Listen and Learn Tour is referenced in that document as a way of traveling through the state and learning what people think and feel. It was a PowerPoint presentation, and the first thing that I heard sitting in this space was the AOE's strategic plan, and they haven't had one for a number of years, and they started out by saying, less freedom, more unity. And as an educator, that makes me cringe, because that does not make for good teaching when it becomes cookie cutter and less freedom, more unity, something that's imposed. Note was just passed to me. Maybe one of the things that we should do is BCTV is recording this. So maybe we should put this in an email to the governor, because this is definitely a listen and learn tour. Okay, and sitting here in this space, 8 o'clock, 10 past 8 at night. Thank you very much. Let's get it going. And that is what I was going to use the word activism. Activism is a good thing. It's not a negative word. It's about community members. It's about educators. It's about parents. It's about people who are not parents. That's not the only path in life to take. I think maybe it's too late now for me. So anyway, I think maybe we should just send this BCTV to the governor and as a message, and not the only message, but as a message. So I just want to once again thank everyone who's here. I want to thank board members and Mark Spino, teachers, colleagues, legislators. And this has been a blast for me to get to meet some of you, and the connections are really quite interesting. The aunt of a former beloved student of mine. So it's a very, very small world to live in Dummerston, Vermont, coming from the Upper West Side of Manhattan. We're all transplants. And that makes for good stuff. We don't all have to be, it's about, we still have the right to travel across state lines. There's some, okay. So there is so much going on all at once, and it is rather exhausting. I'm going to call on Ruby, but just everyone in a school like BUHS, in a district like this one, that makes an evening like this possible. We're not in the Cusick room, we're at BUHS, and this has been remarkable. Ruby McAdoo, you had your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that we do have a meeting tomorrow that I believe will be processing kind of our takeaways and thoughts around this meeting. One of the things I think would be great to hear, if you happen to be at that meeting, chime in and tell us how this felt, because as Deborah mentioned, and I think has been mentioned, a few times by the legislators as well, this can't just be the one, this isn't one and done. We need to engage. We need to keep touching, we have to reach out to each other. And so this was one opportunity. There might be others. There might be different ways. But if we don't hear that this is helpful, there are 50 people in this physical room. There are probably more on Zoom. Good God, I wish this room was full. And so how can we get there? And is it necessary to get there? And I think having the legislators come was really, to me, was really valuable, because they're up there. They're in Montpelier. They're the closest we have to understanding what's going on. Their ear is solidly on the ground. So I really do hope that if you are in the room tomorrow or on Zoom tomorrow, you can put out your voice and whether or not this was helpful in terms of future events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And it's interesting. I am so grateful for everybody who's in the space and so grateful for everyone who is on Zoom. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chair, there being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
Then we got a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we are adjourned for the evening. Thank you very much.
At 8:17.